Wild Health is about optimizing you. We use genomics, blood work, biometrics, microbiome assessment, many other tests, and a conversation with you to come up with a full health optimization plan. What's the perfect diet, exercise, and supplement plan for you and only you? The Wild Health podcast is about optimizing all of us. Here we cover the cutting edge science that gives you the base to be able to apply the personalized plan we give you as a patient. To sign up as a patient, go to wildhealth.com. Or if you're a physician or health coach and you want to learn how to do this for your patients, we're happy to help as well. Wildhealth.com for all the information on becoming a patient or working with us. All right, welcome to the Wild Health Podcast. Today, I am really excited. I don't think I've ever been more excited to record a podcast because I have with me Jim Dethmer. Jim is the author of the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. It's the only book that I've ever read 3 times. And I think I only need to read it probably 7 or 8 more to totally get it. But I want to just really quickly read a quote I found about Jim that I thought was great. This is from a CEO and founder of a company called Centro. He said, Jim is one of the most prolific, engaging, and thought-provoking speakers I've ever witnessed. His ability to capture the audience, dive deeper than surface-level topics, and get the audience to think, reflect, and shift in a short period of time is masterful. His energy, passion, and enthusiasm for his work and his desire to help others improve and transform their lives and relationships has had a lasting impact on many lives at our company. I love that quote because it resonates with me very deeply. As I mentioned, I'm a huge fan of the book. I recommend it to people constantly, and I've had the great pleasure of getting to work more closely with Jim over the last several months. And what I can say is that it's been both one of the most difficult and transformative experiences of my life. I'm not going to lie and say it's been easy because it hasn't been, but it's been totally worth it and so meaningful for me. So Jim, I want to start just by asking, how are you doing today?
Well, hi, Matt. First of all, it's great to see you. Um, well, in this moment, I feel a combination of excited for what we might create together and a little anxious and apprehensive. We're having some tech issues as we get going, working with a new program, and I noticed myself getting anxious. Am I going to get this right? Is this going to turn out okay? If I breathe, the anxiety is kind of softening, relaxing a little bit. Yeah, and then what's here is excitement. I love the idea of kind of stepping into the unknown with you and seeing what emerges. We don't have a big agenda or script or anything, so we'll just get to see what emerges when 2 humans show up and get as present as they can and have a conversation.
Thank you. And I wanted to start specifically by asking you how you're doing because you answer honestly and truthfully, which is the first time that you ever did that. It took me by surprise and I was caught a little off guard because you don't actually expect an answer to that question of how you're doing and you actually tell someone. And so I think that leads me into maybe my first question. What I'd really like to talk about is emotional literacy. I think for forever I've read about EQ and how critically important emotional intelligence is in business. And I think I always thought of myself as having high EQ. And what I've realized in the last couple of years, and then specifically when working with you more, is that I wasn't even emotionally literate, much less emotionally intelligent. And I heard you say one time that emotional intelligence follows emotional literacy. So do you mind to unpack that a little bit and why emotional literacy is important?
Sure. Yeah. So for me, emotional literacy is the ability to know what you're feeling in any given moment and to give it a label and to express it. It's as simple as the ability to say, I feel, followed by a feeling statement. Now, it sounds so basic, and I think it is basic. It's what we should have learned when we were little children, but it got dropped out of most of our, growth and education, and it never got replaced. So my story is that when I was in my mid 20s, my wife and I went to marriage counseling. And I'd never been to counseling at that point. I'd never been to marriage counseling. And at one point, the therapist said to me, Jim, what are you feeling? And I'll never forget it. My answer was something like, I feel like she's wrong, or I feel that she doesn't get it. And the psychologist looked at me and got a wry smile on his face. I'll never forget this. He turned around, took a book off the shelf behind him, and he opened the book to a particular page that had a list of feelings on it. And then he said, Jim, from now on, whenever I ask you how you're feeling, I'd like you to look at this page, find a feeling that matches your internal experience, and then say, I feel that. So it could be, I feel sad, or I feel scared, or I feel anxious, or I feel happy, or I feel delighted, or I feel peaceful. But it sounded so revolutionary, and yet I didn't know how to do it. So there are two dimensions to it. First, you have to actually be able to turn your attention inward and have enough self-awareness to know what is my current emotional state, which again takes some practice. When I first start working with leaders on this, they might not have any more capacity to make distinctions than I feel good or I feel bad. So the more literate you become, the more you can make accurate distinctions on your emotions and your feelings. That's important, especially as we move to emotional intelligence, EQ, and then emotional wisdom, which is the third stage. So at the beginning of the journey, it's the ability to take a pause, become self-reflective, look inside, and begin to be able to distinguish, what does sadness feel like when it's here? What does anger feel like? What does fear feel like? What does joy feel like? And with a little bit of practice, most people can start to learn to pause, turn inward, check, and identify a feeling state. Now, to help the people that we coach, we've come up with the idea that there are 5 core feelings. They're kind of like the 3 primary colors. All the other colors come out of those colors. And these 5 core feelings make up all the dozens of other possible feelings. So we just say the 5 core feelings are sad, which could be being a little bit blue, melancholy, down, flat, even depressed, grief-stricken. That's one core feeling, sad. Another one is angry, which could be irritated, frustrated, pissed off, angry, rageful. The third one is scared or fear, which could be just a little anxious, nervous, apprehensive. Could be scare all the way over to terror. And then the fourth one is joy, which could be very kind of a quiet kind of joy, which could be peace or equanimity or contentment, happiness, joy, bliss. And then the fifth one, which is kind of the wild card, especially when you're working with leaders and organizations, is sexual feelings, which are probably the first feelings we ever feel. We might actually feel sexual feelings in utero. They're particular sensations in and on the body. They're key to creativity. They're key to connection, but they are often not welcome in the workplace. So we don't always talk about them unless leaders are willing to get curious about that fifth core feeling. So emotional intelligence, emotional literacy is just the ability to pause, check in, see what feeling is here, and then express it in a simple way. I feel scared. Or like we did at the beginning, I said, I feel excited and I feel anxious, a little bit of scared. That's emotional literacy. And it's a key to developing emotional intelligence, because you can't get the wisdom of a feeling and the gift of the feeling until you can label a feeling and know what it is. Does that make sense, what emotional literacy is?
For sure. And explaining it is one thing. What I love about speaking with you is getting to see you put it into action. So when I asked you about how you were feeling, if someone had asked me that before, I would have had a hard time. But as you said it, and then afterwards, I was thinking, yeah, my heart is racing. I have this sensation in my chest and my stomach, and it is anxiety. We had the difficulties with AV and IT, and just some fear that I'm going to mess this up. I had this opportunity to introduce Jim to people, and the gift that gave me of noticing that then is that I focused on it while you were talking then, and now it's dissipated and
Right.
it's not stuck in there, which traditionally it would just be stuck for me for a long time. It would just kind of sit in this loop that I would have. So I know it's important to just be literate in general. So the word helps me know that is important, but I've just seen the benefit of letting it pass through. So that makes
And
total
you
sense.
actually evidenced there a couple of a little bit of mastery, because you said, I checked, and then you reported body sensations, right? So you can feel the anxiety actually in your body. What we suggest to people is that feelings or emotions are actually sensations that are occurring in and on the body. You find your current feeling state by checking in the body, not by thinking with your head. You can't think your way to what you're feeling. You actually sense your way to what you're feeling. Now, the mind's important because it interprets the body feelings. So the more emotionally literate you become, you develop the capacity to say, anger's here. I can feel heat in the front of my face. I can feel tightness in my jaw. I can feel, like pulsating up the back of my neck. Or you can say, fear's here. And you could say, where's that? Well, it feels like constriction in the throat, maybe pressure in the chest, maybe some tingling in the eyes if tears are coming. Fears here could be something in the belly. The body is the first line of awareness, and it actually tells you what you're feeling. And so you evidenced that. And then the second thing you evidenced was when you let yourself notice what your body was feeling, you had a little anxiety like I did around the tech issues. At least that's what we imagine it was about. And then you just got present to it. While I was talking, you just kind of sat with the body sensations and the anxiety. And then what you reported is that the anxiety softened, it loosened, it actually went away, which is what we know about these emotions. If you don't repress them, which is what most of us do, if you ask somebody what they're feeling, the reason they have a hard time expressing what they're feeling is because they've repressed or suppressed most of their feelings. We were trained to do that. So it's like they're locked away in the basement, and then somebody says, what are you feeling? You go, I don't know. I haven't visited the basement for years. How the heck would I know what's going down there? But you've been willing to feel what you feel, locate it in your body, sit with it with a little bit of breath, and then my experience is that most feelings will pass through in seconds. 10, 20, 30 seconds. Hardly ever do they last more than a minute. If you don't resist them, if you just breathe, they just kind of vibrate through. So you are taking emotional literacy a step further, turning your awareness, labeling, locating in the body, and then simply giving it presence until it moves through. That's what real emotional literacy is.
Well, that's definitely the first time anyone's ever used the words emotion and mastery in the same sentence in reference to me. So I'll take it. I'm going to put a check mark there. But you said something really interesting there, that we imagined or made up the story that our anxiety was because of the IT issues. Can you talk a little bit about the difference in thoughts and feelings or emotion, and which comes first, and that whole cycle, that loop that we get into?
Yeah, it's great. So again, these are simple concepts. If feelings are sensations in and on the body, then you should be able to locate them. Like you feel, pounding in your chest, or you feel, pressure in the front of your face. They're literal sensations. Thoughts we know occur someplace else. Like if I tell you, think about a big red balloon, Well, you know where you go to visualize it. You know where you to go to think about it. If I tell you, think about the formula E equals mc squared, you don't go to your belly or your heart or your throat or your face. Those occur usually in this realm inside the head where thoughts occur. So it's really important to distinguish thoughts from feelings. They're two different things. Now, they're very related. We refer to what we call the cognitive-emotive loop. So cognitive, thinking, emotive, feeling. The way it works for most people is a thought occurs, like you're driving down the highway and somebody cuts you off in traffic. Now, what we think is that a thought arises. That person shouldn't have cut me off. Some of our thoughts in a situation like that are more graphic and more toxic. We label that person, we label their behavior. We have a thought. That SOB should learn how to drive. And that thought generates a feeling. In that case, the feeling would probably be anger, irritation, frustration. Now, if you actually got present, you might also discover that there was some fear there, because if the person cut you off in a way that you sensed a lack of safety or threat, then there would have been a fear impulse as well. So there's an anger impulse and a fear impulse. And the thought, that person shouldn't have done that. So now there's a thought, cognitive, and emotive, two feelings. Now, what you actually discover is that often these primary feelings arise first. It's because of the nature of the whole limbic system and the way that the chemicals in our body work. So long before a thought occurs, that person shouldn't have cut me off, chemicals are being released into the body, which produce feeling states: fight, flight, freeze, faint, fawn, the 5 feeling reactions to a given stimuli. And so our body goes into a reactive state because of the chemicals. And then the mind thinks that person shouldn't have cut me off. So we think the thought arises first, but often the feeling arises first, and then the thought arises. They're in a relationship though, because then once I start really auguring down in the thought, that SOB cut me off, I'm fueling the emotion. So then I get more irritated, more angry. Now, unlike what you did a few minutes ago, we don't release the anger. We actually kind of lock into the anger, and that fuels the thought. So we get even more indignant that the person cut us off. And the more indignant we become, the more pissed off we become. So it's like the thought fuels the emotion charges the thought exacerbates the feeling accentuates the thought, and we go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and we're caught in this cognitive emotive loop. Remember I said a few minutes ago that a feeling, if you locate it in the body and just feel it, it goes through in just a couple of seconds. But if you stay in that cognitive emotive loop, you can stay pissed off for hours, for weeks. Actually, the anger turns into a mood. A mood is different than a feeling. A feeling is energy in or on the body in the given moment. A mood is like a calcified feeling. Now that feeling of anger turns into a mood of resentment or bitterness. And moods turn into postures. Literally, the body starts to form itself around bitterness and resentment, and it turns into a posture and a stance. And this is what happens in a lot of long-term relationships where people haven't dealt with their feelings in clean ways. They've instead gotten stuck in that cognitive emotive loop. Like you think about your intimate partner, they should be more appreciative of me. And let's say when you think that thought, you feel angry and a little sad. But you don't deconstruct the cognitive emotive loop. You just fuel it. And then it becomes a belief that your partner is entitled and ungrateful. Now your feeling has turned into a mood of resentment. Now underneath, there's always this kind of low-level resentment. You don't love and appreciate me the way you should. And then that turns into a posture in the relationship, which toxifies the relationship. Now, this is a big idea. This is why we say it's really good to feel the feeling all the way through to completion, to interrupt the cognitive emotive loop. So you break that fueling of the thought to the emotion and the emotion to the thought, deconstruct the thought, feel the feeling, and then it doesn't leave a toxic residue. So now we're moving over to emotional intelligence. Emotional literacy is the ability to just name a feeling in a given moment. Emotional intelligence is the ability to feel a feeling all the way through to completion, release it so that you're free to show up to the next moment without carrying the baggage of past feelings and moods and postures into the next moment. So now you're free to be with life as it occurs in each now moment, and to be with every relationship as it occurs without carrying the baggage of the past into it. There's a lot there, but does that make sense?
That's great. I appreciate it. Yeah. I, you mentioned something. So we've everyone knows the importance of IQ. Now we've talked about EQ some. For me, with everything that I want to accomplish in the world, raising 4 children, having a great relationship with my wife, having an impact on the world with my business, I need all the intelligences I can get. And so you mentioned the body intelligence as well, which is a brand new concept for me. But do you mind to talk about that just a little bit, maybe around even the concept of a whole body yes or a whole body no, or wherever you think
Yeah,
we can
great.
discuss that the best?
So when we think about intelligence, there are lots of ways to think about it. I think years ago when I first took an IQ test, I think they had 2 forms of intelligence. There was like spatial IQ and verbal IQ or something like that. I think now we can measure like 19 different forms of intelligence. When it comes to being a human, I like to kind of make it simple. So there's IQ, which we all know about that. That's just the ability to think clearly. Now, there's lots of factors that go into that. And then there's EQ, which is emotional intelligence. And we've talked about a couple of pieces of emotional intelligence. There's one more piece I want to hit on that's part of emotional intelligence. So these feelings occur as sensations in the body. If we don't resist, repress, or suppress them, they move through in just a very short amount of time. And they leave behind a wisdom. So here's what we're pointing at is anger, we now know, always carries the wisdom of boundaries. So people who don't have good access to their anger don't have good boundaries in life. They can't say no and mean it. They can't say stop and mean it. So it's incredibly important that in relationships we have good boundaries. And the emotion that helps us have good boundaries is anger. Not righteous, judgmental, bitter, vindictive anger. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the instantaneous emotion that comes up when a perceived boundary violation occurs. I think about dogs. Like you got a couple of dogs. I had a dog. You know, if you're walking through your house in the middle of the night and your dog is asleep on the floor and you inadvertently don't see it and you step on its tail, it has a charge of emotion. It gets up. It might growl. It might bark. It gets startled. And it basically says, stop, back off, don't step on my tail. Now, it sends that message to you pretty clearly, pretty quickly. Now, here's the great thing about a dog. After 10 or 15 seconds, it doesn't keep barking at you, growling. If you honor its boundary and stop doing the boundary violation, in a few seconds, it's wagging its tail. It's moved through it. Anger did what it was meant to do. It set a boundary. And then it comes back into presence. So every feeling has a wisdom. The wisdom of anger is stop, no, boundary. The wisdom of fear, all fear is here to ask us to pay attention. So for example, I felt anxiety at the beginning of our call. I actually felt it when I started to log on to our call and saw that we were using a different software that I didn't know. I immediately felt scared. Okay, that energy is saying, Jim, pay attention, wake up. If this would have been on Zoom, where I do many of these things, I could have done it in my sleep. I just hit this button, click this button, do this audio setting, do this video setting, no problem. But I couldn't sleepwalk through this new software. The anxiety was saying, pay attention, pay attention. I needed to download a new version of Chrome. So it was saying, wake up. Fear is also always saying, there's something you're not facing. A lot of times when fear, nervousness, apprehension comes up, it's because we're not fully facing something. So first you feel the fear, and then you ask, what am I not fully facing? What am I not dealing with? Now, again, a lot of us get anxious and we go into the future, and that's a waste of time. So anxiety comes up because of the software, and I go, crap. I'm going to screw this up. I'm not going to keep my agreement with Matt to be there at the appointed time. What if I can't get this to work at all? Now I'm in the future. So now I'm using my anxiety, but I'm going into the future, which is what most people do with anxiety. That's a waste of time. The actual feeling is inviting me to pay attention in this now moment and to ask, is there something I need to do now? Sadness, the third, we'll just do anger, fear, and sadness. Sadness is a beautiful emotion, and it tells us that something needs to be released. Something needs to be let go of. Actually, something often needs to be grieved. So it might be the loss of a vision, or the loss of a relationship, or the loss of an opportunity. It might be that you realize that your child, you put them on a bus to go to kindergarten or to first grade, if you ever do this, and you realize all that came before this, the years that I had of being with my child at home, of walking them to, the nursery school or whatever, those are over I'll never forget putting my oldest daughter on a bus to go to kindergarten for the time. She got on the bus and she drove, and I just stood there and cried. It was partly joy and gratitude and love for her, but also a sense of loss of these moments are passing away. Well, people say, well, what's the value of that? Well, the value of grieving is that when you grieve what needs to be let go of, you open yourself to a new possibility. If you don't grieve and let go of the old, you're not available for the new. I couldn't fully appreciate her as a kindergartner because I'm still holding on to her as a 2-year-old. I grieve that so that I can fully appreciate her in her new state. And I say to leaders all the time, if you can't feel sadness and you can't grieve, people won't feel like you've got a heart. You might have a great brain, you might have a great vision, you might have great drive, but people want to know that their leader has a heart. This is what was missing in George Patton. This is why I love watching that movie so much. When he gets so mad at that soldier who had gotten scared and run from the front lines, he had no compassion, no heart, and it ultimately got him in trouble. Leaders need a heart. They need to feel sadness. Okay, so IQ, EQ is the ability to get the wisdom of the feeling. It's just a data set. Thinking is a data set, feeling is a data set, and now, long way around to your ultimate question, BQ, which is body intelligence. Your body is giving you information all the time. And most of us were never trained to listen to our body. Now, we've all felt this. Like, most of us have been in a situation where there might be some danger that we're walking into. It could be a dangerous situation. And we actually, our body registers something's off. It could be just a little, like a little queasiness in our stomach or a little sensation in our back, like we're just in hyper alert, but it's not mental, it's physical. We actually start to be able to see things that we normally wouldn't see visually because we're in that alerted state and our body is telling us danger. Danger, danger. Well, we say that the body is filled with intelligence. I train leaders that when they're interviewing people to hire, you might go through a great checklist. You might have all these hiring questions. You might have normal questions that you ask to discern whether the person's a good cultural fit. But I've trained leaders over the years, ask all those, then ask your heart, what do you feel when you're in the presence of this person? And ask your body, Does your body sense anything when you're with this person? And leaders will say, they'll often say this, it's just a gut sense. I don't know what it is. They check all the boxes. On paper, they're the perfect hire. I just have a weird gut sense. That's body intelligence. So we talk about having a whole body yes, which is your head says yes, your heart says yes, your whole body says yes. When you have a whole body yes to a decision, whether it's a new product or whether to get, lasagna or a chicken breast for dinner, your body will have information for you. If you learn to line up your head, your heart, your gut, you become a much more potent decision maker. So that's what we mean by whole body yes and by BQ in a nutshell.
Thank you. Very helpful. So yesterday I sent you an email and I was reviewing the questions I wanted to ask for this podcast. And as I was reviewing, I was starting to get very excited because there's so many things, there's just so much juicy stuff. And then I felt fear. And as you mentioned, fear is pay attention. And so I paid attention and I realized that we had an hour planned and there was no way we could get through all of it in 4 to 5 hours. And so I emailed you and I committed to covering one commitment during this time. And I realized just now that we're over halfway through and we haven't even started on one single commitment. So the commitment I think I do want to dive into is just the commitment, which is pretty straightforward, of ending blame and criticism. And the reason and that sounds fairly straightforward and simple. And I think most people can get on board with that. It's not an esoteric thing. However, I don't think it's as straightforward as it sounds. I have examples in my mind of where this has been difficult. And an example from last night when I totally messed it up, even though I've been working on this for a while now. So can you maybe just talk about that commitment and give some examples of what it means and how to actually put that into practice in your life? Because it's also one that, again, you wrote the book for leadership, but that's so, in every relationship, at home, your intimate relationships, your friends, at work, ending blame and criticism. If people could do that, yeah, that'd be a great takeaway.
Game changer. So we have to give it a little bit of a frame. So what we suggest is that in any given moment, you're either like in a triggered, reactive state, or you're in what we might call presence. You're in an open, present, available, curious state. In any given moment, you're either, we just say, below the line, triggered, reactive, closed, defensive. You're prioritizing survival because you experience a threat. You look out at the world and it feels like there's a threat to something that matters to you. It doesn't have to be a threat to your physical well-being. In fact, it rarely is. It's usually a threat to your identity or your ego. So at any moment, we're in a threatened state, or we're in an open, curious, trusting, available state. When we're in a threatened state, which most of us are most of the time, we're scanning our world. All you have to do is open an email and look who the email's from. All you have to do is see the name that it's from and the subject line, and you immediately go into a reactive state. You have a history with this person, maybe a conflictual history, or there's some baggage in the relationship. So before you ever start reading the email, you've already closed up a little bit. You're in a self-protective posture because you're experiencing the email as a threat. You're not open and curious and available. Okay. Now, one of the things that happens when we're in that triggered reactive state is we blame and we criticize. Blaming, complaining, and criticizing is something we do when we're below the line in order to try to be okay. Go back to me driving down the road and somebody cuts me off. I'm immediately in a triggered reactive state. I'm below the line. And from that place, I blame and complain about the driver. I criticize them. That's natural and normal. In fact, we say that blaming and criticizing is what most of us do most of the time to try to make ourselves more secure, a little safer, a little less threatened. We feel like we can protect ourselves if we're blaming and complaining. So I say that because when we say the first commitment is to end blame and criticism, the first thing I say is good luck. You'll never fully end it. You've been practicing. You were blaming and complaining last night. I've been practicing. I was blaming and complaining today. Debbie and I were sitting in our living room. We were actually doing a project in the living room, and all of a sudden, a dog comes running through an open door, jumps over the back of the couch, and jumps into the middle of the room. And it happened to be a friend who was visiting our neighbor. And the dog came running through the woods, came through our open door. It's a beautiful day here, jumped over the couch and into the middle of the room. Adorable dog, by the way, absolutely adorable. But it was right there in the midst of what we were doing. And I got reactive, especially when I saw it had muddy feet and it had placed its muddy feet all over the couch and then on our light colored carpet. I got reactive. And my first move was to settle the dog first and lift the dog up. The dog was adorable. And take the dog and put it outside our door and shut the door. And immediately I went to blame. What's that person doing letting their dog just roam through the woods and come jumping into our house? Now, I don't make myself bad or wrong for blaming and criticizing. It's just being human. Now, I could stay in blame and criticism for a long time. I could continue to blame and criticize my neighbor's friend. I could blame and criticize the dog. Now I'm below the line and staying stuck below the line. And all we suggest is when you're below the line and when you're stuck in blame and criticism, predictable things happen. If I stay in blame and criticism, I'm going to have a very bad afternoon. I'm going to have a suboptimized relationship with my neighbor and their visiting guest. Especially if they go into blame and criticism as well. Now we're just two humans trapped in blame and criticism and complaining, and we're just going to have a drama-filled relationship. That's the way most people live. The other option is to choose, and it's always a choice, to choose to end blame and criticism, at least in that moment. Now, if you're going to end blame and criticism, what are you going to put in its place? That's the question. And one thing that you're going to put in its place is this idea of taking radical responsibility. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's a choice to move out of being at the effect of life. I'm at the effect of the dog coming through the door, jumping over the couch, muddy footprints. I'm at the effect of it. The dog is causing my upset. Rather, take responsibility and get all of my learnings out of the situation. So the difference is life isn't happening to me. That's the way it feels when I'm below the line, reactive in blame and criticism. Life is happening for me. You get to decide. You get to make this up. I'm not saying it's axiomatically true. It's not a philosophical or theological or metaphysical proposition. You just get to decide. How do you want to play the game of life? Well, often, most of the time, I play the game, life is happening for me. It's here to show me something. It's here to teach me something. It's here to wake me up. Well, from there, I can take 100% responsibility for creating my experience. Now, stay with the dog. The dog didn't upset me. I upset myself. When I'm in blame and complain, I'm blaming the dog, blaming the neighbor's friend, blaming the neighbor. Once I get what it means to take 100% responsibility, I'm upsetting myself. The dog isn't doing it. Well, how am I upsetting myself? I'm upsetting myself by believing the dog shouldn't have come into my house with muddy paws. The dog isn't upsetting me. It's my beliefs about what the dog did that is upsetting me. That's a powerful shift. So I take responsibility for my feelings, and then I take responsibility for how I'm upsetting myself. I get curious about that. Now it's no longer about the dog. It's not about the neighbor. It's not about the neighbor's friend. It's about me, my beliefs, how I'm upsetting myself. Now, we'll go fast here, but I can go even farther. I can say to myself, how did I co-create the dog coming into our house, not from blaming myself, just from getting curious. Well, lo and behold, if I think back a couple hours earlier, Deb and I were sitting having lunch out on our porch, beautiful sunny day. We were looking at the lake. And all of a sudden, this adorable dog comes prancing onto our deck. Never seen the dog on our deck, hadn't met the dog. It's adorable. It was running around. We were playing with the dog. I pick the dog up. I take the dog back to its owner. I say, hey, I don't know what you're looking for, but she came over. The owner said, no, she's just learning to roam around. Great. Okay. I went to sleep. I left the door open. I could see our neighbor's dog and that dog out there playing. I could have shut the door. I could have been present enough to go, if I leave this door open, this dog might very likely come running in. Now, again, I'm not wrong or bad. I'm just taking responsibility for being a co creator of the experience, and I'm taking responsibility for upsetting myself. So I've moved from being at the effect of life, what we call victim consciousness, like life is happening to me, to taking radical responsibility for being the creator of my upset and the co creator of my experience. So now I'm living from true empowerment, true agency versus disempowerment and victimhood. Those are two radically different ways to live in life. So that's why we put it as the first of the 15 commitments, because it's so foundational to playing the game of life a radically different way.
I want to point out something you didn't say there. You didn't say when you were giving that story that it was your fault, and I bring that up because I think some people. I just had a conversation a couple of days ago related to our business, talking with someone, and we had an issue in a different department. Two people were talking about the issue, and one was talking about how a certain person in this department was this, not responsive, and then the other person said, well, hey, I haven't been managing them. It's my fault. I've been doing this thing. And I stopped them and said, you're both blaming. You're blaming someone else. You're blaming yourself. So they were both blaming, but I didn't hear you say that. You didn't say it's my fault. You didn't blame yourself. Can you talk about that? Because a lot of people, I think, get confused with taking responsibility, their 100% responsibility, with taking too much responsibility, or 110% or blaming themselves.
That's right. It's a great observation, Matt. The way blame goes, blame can flow three directions. It can move toward another. The other could be a person, a dog, the weather. It's pointing a finger at somebody or something. It can also blame the system. So there's a big system that's screwing it up for all the rest of us. But where a lot of people go is they blame themselves. And just like you're saying, blame, whether it's directed at a person, a circumstance, a situation, or yourself, is still toxic. Self blame is every bit as toxic as blaming other people. And what it does is it puts you in a low learning state, a self critical low learning state. Now, here's the big shift that has to occur. As long as you think that what is happening is a problem, the mind is going to try to figure out whose fault it is that the problem is here. And its job, the job of the mind, is going to be to assign blame. So remember before, I said you either decide that life is happening to you or you decide that life is happening for you. Now, this is a radically big idea. But if life is happening to you, then your life is filled with problems. It's also filled with opportunities and possibilities, but it's filled with problems. And what you're going to try to do is figure out who caused the problem, whose fault is it, so that you can fix it so the problem doesn't happen again. That's natural, that's normal. But if life isn't filled with problems, if life is filled with possibilities for learning and growth, if life has an agenda and the agenda is to wake you up, this is a big idea, then there are not problems, there are only opportunities to wake up. So let's go a little bit deeper with the dog thing, since it's pretty obvious and pretty simple. So the dog comes running in the house, jumps up on the couch, leaves its muddy footprints, disturbs what Debbie and I are doing. What if life is trying to wake me up? What if life is for me? How could this whole thing be for me? Well, this actually, I'm thinking about now, it's actually comical. What Debbie and I were doing is we were putting our living room back together. We were putting it back together because it's been under construction for about a month and a half. They've been putting stone on our fireplace and putting in a new hearth and painting, and all new windows got put in. Literally, the contractors are here today. We're putting the room back together. So Debbie and I had a tape measure out. We're measuring how far the sofa ought to be from the coffee table and blah, 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 blah. You get the feeling here, right? Finally, our home is not a construction zone. Finally, we can get our living room back to the way it was meant to be. We've washed the floor, we've gotten everything. And here comes a muddy hooved dog jumping on our couch and onto the floor. Now, from reactive and below the line, I can go, holy shit, we finally get this place momentarily back to where it goes. And now we got muddy dog prints all over our couch. You can see how I could see that as a problem. And I could look to blame the dog, blame the people, blah, 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 blah. But what if this? What if the universe, whatever you want to call it, universe, the cosmic force, I don't care, is playing with me? And it's saying, Jim, you're about ready to get overly attached to the perfection of your living room. You're a little attached. You're taking it a little bit seriously. So it sends this big ball of wagging puppy fur into my house to leave some muddy prints on my couch. What if that is actually a gift to keep me from becoming overly attached to my stuff and to having my stuff be perfect? Now, I'm just thinking this, talking to you. I hadn't spent time thinking about this. But if that's the case, I go, thank you. Because one of the things I've signed up for in life is I want to have proper perspective about stuff. I don't want stuff to control me. I want to use my stuff for life and joy and fun. I don't want to be a slave of my stuff. Well, what if the universe said, hey, dog, go run through the muddy forest, jump on the guy's couch, and wag your tail and lick him so that he can see that he's taken all this too damn seriously? Well, if I take that approach, and I'm not saying that's the right approach, I'm just saying that's another approach. By the way, it's a more fun approach than getting pissed off at the dog and immediately panicking because my couch has a couple of muddy prints on it, doing what I would often do. This is a much more playful, fun approach. And now there's not a problem to be solved. Now there's a situation to learn from. And it's not just about learning to shut my door. It's about learning to be respectful of the stuff that I own, to take care of it, but not be attached and controlling of it. Now this little vignette with a dog is here teaching me a meaningful principle about how to live life skillfully. Well, in that world, there's nobody to blame. There's no fault to find. There's just life showing up as life. And if you looked at that situation in the office and chose to see it that way, you and the other two people could see that the same way. By the way, that doesn't mean you won't fix the process. If there's a bug in the software, you fix the bug. If there's a person problem, the person needs to be trained, developed, or even let go, you'll take care of it. But you won't do it from a fault-finding, small, ego-driven identity that's trying to control the damn world. You'll do it from a place of openness and curiosity and playfulness. That's what's available in this first commitment.
That's amazing. Thank you, Jim. If I was, and now that we are out of time, if I was living at the effect of, I could complain about our IT issues and the fact that I haven't covered one single question that I was so excited about. But since the universe is for me, what I know is this is an incredible opportunity to come and do this in person for the follow-up, because Jim can't use the internet, so I'm going to have to come to him and get to see your place in Michigan. Yeah,
Perfect.
the universe is for us. Yeah. So no, I really appreciate it. And one last thing I think I'll say, because you've recommended this to me when you talked about not having problems. That's, and the way you describe that, it's beautiful. But just hearing it one time is one thing. You recommended the book to me, Loving What Is by Byron Katie. And I think just listening to that and seeing example after example of people putting that into practice was transformative. So if you haven't read the 15 Commitments, what are you doing? Read that book. But also, I think Loving What Is. And I guess the last thing I just will ask you before we end, is there anything else you would like to add, or other resources where people can go? Hopefully they're inspired.
Well, if they go to our website, which is conscious.is, and you can, we have all kinds of resources there, and you can sort by commitment. So you can go to commitment number 1 on taking responsibility and ending blame and criticism. And we've got, PDFs there. I've recorded a meditation you can do. It's like a 10-minute meditation on how to put this in your life. Do that once a week for a month and see what happens. We've got all kinds of resources there for you on this commitment if people want to go explore.
Thank you. Yeah, hopefully people will go check that. We'll put links in the podcast as well. And this was a dream to talk to you, Jim. I really appreciate it. I can't thank you enough.
So fun, man. I love hanging out with you, man.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening to the Wild Health Podcast. If you want more daily health education, be sure to follow us on Instagram, which is filled with health optimization how-tos, grocery shopping lists, guided breathwork posts, myth debunking, and so much more. You can find us at Wild Health MD on Instagram.